Shanghai is one of China's largest cities, both in size and population. It is one of 4 municipalities directly under the jurisdiction of the central government of China, rather than belonging to a province. Located at the mouth of the Yangtze River on China's east coast, Shanghai is bordered to the north by Jiangsu Province, whose capital is Nanjing, and to the south by Zhejiang Province, whose capital is Hangzhou. If you came to Shanghai as a tourist, what would you put on your list of must-see sites? The Bund, Nanjing Road, the historic Yu Garden, perhaps the tallest building in Asia, Shanghai Center Tower. You might have heard that travelers often like to visit a place called Xintiandi. From these photos, we can see that Xintiandi is a trendy dining, entertainment, and shopping district. But there's more to the building's unusual design. It's an example of Shanghai's unique traditional architectural style called Shikumen. Today, we will learn about the history and signature elements of Shikumen architecture, which will help us gain a better understanding of Shanghai's urban culture. Part 1. Origin of the name Shikumen. Why is this architectural style called Shikumen? In Chinese, men means door or gate. Shikumen-style buildings typically have very distinctive gates, as seen in the following photos from our collection. Notice how two gates have nearly identical characteristics, even though they were built years apart. The gate of the house is framed with sturdy stone bars and flanked by 2 stone columns. The 2 wooden door panels are painted black and have traditional bronze knockers. Since the whole door is surrounded by stone, it looks like the door has a strong stone frame. The word for stone in Mandarin is shi, and the word for frame in the Shanghai dialect gu sounds like the Mandarin word ku. Hence, the name Shikumen, meaning stone-framed gate. Part 2. The historical background of Shikumen. Before the emergence of Shikumen in Shanghai, most of the traditional homes in the Jiangnan region were courtyard houses. Courtyard houses are symmetrically constructed as 4 sides surrounding a central open-air quadrangle, with the primary rooms of the house, including the head of the household's bedroom, forming the north side. The east and west wings contain the son's bedrooms, and the back rooms at the south end of the house often served as the servants' quarters. The rise of Shikumen is inseparable from the historical development of Shanghai. The Small Swords Society uprising and the Taiping Rebellion in particular led to the necessity of Shikumen-style houses. In 1853, the Small Swords Society attempted to overthrow the government in Shanghai. The rebellion lasted for 2 years, but was eventually put down by the Qing government in 1854. Then, in the early 1860s, a group of rebels calling themselves the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom twice attacked Shanghai in order to establish their own government. In the end, they also failed to take the city. The Small Swords Society uprising broke the situation of Huayang Fenju. These 2 events we mentioned led to a large number of Chinese people seeking refuge in the concessions, since they were relatively safe at that time. In particular, the Taiping Rebellion brought a large number of refugees from southern Jiangsu and northern Zhejiang to Shanghai. Wealthy refugees brought with them an influx of capital, while poorer migrants became a source of cheap labor. Data shows that before 1853, fewer than 500 Chinese people lived in the concessions. But by 1862, that population had grown to 500,000. The sudden population increase in the concessions reduced the amount of available housing. Many foreign investors, such as David Sassoon and Company, saw this as a business opportunity and pivoted to real estate. Businessmen from Jiangsu and Zhejiang province, who moved to Shanghai to escape from the rebels, soon followed, investing their fortunes in real estate, purchasing land and building houses. The Shikumen architecture style thus developed as a response to the specific demands of the time. Part 3. The architectural features of Shikumen. Real estate developers needed a new housing design which conserved space while allowing the Chinese inhabitants to maintain their lifestyle as much as possible. They decided to combine the courtyard house, the most common dwelling structure in Shanghai and the neighboring provinces, and the row house, a semi-detached type of housing found in Europe. Shikumen followed the traditional courtyard house layout, with a hall, wings, and bedrooms on either side, a yard in the front and a kitchen in the back. But the yard was reduced to a small courtyard, and the living and bedroom spaces were converted to two-story buildings and arranged in a row house layout. These houses, when grouped together along a street, formed a main lane and a sub-lane, similar to a traditional Chinese alley called Li Long. The traditional courtyard house features, adopted in the constructions of new houses, satisfied the needs of the new Chinese inhabitants, while row house features were used to save space. At first, these houses were built simply using wood. The concession authorities prohibited the construction of wooden houses due to safety concerns. Soon after, the first development of masonry timber houses was built. Built in 1872, Xinrenli is thought to be one of the earliest Shikumen neighborhoods in the concession. Its existence was first noted in touring notes in Shanghai, published in 1876. It was located south of East Beijing Road, to the east of Middle Henan Road, and to the north of Ningbo Road. Now, we will discuss the basic structure and the main architectural elements of Shikumen. The basic structure. Entering through the front gate of Shikumen, we first see the courtyard. Courtyard Tianjing. The courtyard is a small open-air space. The function of the courtyard is to improve ventilation and lighting. With a courtyard located in the center of the home, the sitting room, entry hall, and the bedroom wings can all have access to fresh air. Furthermore, this design adheres to Chinese architectural traditions, isolating the inside from the outside while still linking to the heaven and earth. Crossing the courtyard, we come to the sitting room. Sitting room, 客堂. Right in the middle of each Shikumen house is the sitting room, also known as the main hall. It faces the courtyard and the gate. It is usually one step higher than the courtyard. The height difference is essential to keeping the sitting room dry in humid Shanghai. The sitting room is the main living and dining room for families in Shikumen houses. It is also the place where they receive guests and have family activities. It connects the wing rooms on sides and the kitchen at the back. Adjacent to the sitting room are the wing rooms. Wing room, 厢房. The rooms on both sides of the sitting room or front room are called wing rooms. They are often used as either studies or bedrooms. Wing rooms on the first floor are usually reserved for the elders in order to save them the trouble of climbing the stairs, while the rooms on the second floor serve as the bedrooms and studies for the younger members of the family. On the way from the first floor to the second floor is a small room called the garret. Garret, 亭子间. The garret is the small, dark room over the kitchen of a Shikumen house. It is usually very small, typically fewer than 10 square meters. This room often gets very cold in winter, since it faces north, and very hot in summer, since it sits above the kitchen. Since it looks like a small pavilion, it has a name, 亭子间, meaning pavilion room. Because it was the smallest and the least comfortable room of the Shikumen, it usually had a much lower rent. The garret was introduced at a late period of old-fashioned Shikumen construction. On the second floor, there are the front room and the wing rooms. Front room, 前楼. The front room is located above the sitting room. It usually faces the south and the courtyard. It is typically used as the master bedroom. Next, we will take you on a virtual tour of the Shikumen Museum in Shanghai, which has examples of the different rooms in a typical Shikumen house. The Shikumen Museum is located in Xintiandi, and the wing rooms on the first floor are used as a study for the male head of the household, and a bedroom for his elderly parents. On the second floor, there are 3 bedrooms for the man and his wife and their children. The main architectural elements of Shikumen: ornamental door heads and the gable walls are distinctive features of traditional Chinese architecture, and they are also important elements of Shikumen buildings. Their different designs in Shikumen reflect a fusion of Western designs and decorations with local characteristics. Balconies did not originally exist in Shikumen houses. In the beginning, people would sometimes build wooden platforms on their kitchen roofs. Later on, as garrets were added over the kitchen structure, balconies were also added. Many of these balconies used Western-style wrought iron railings. Part 4. Shikumen at Shanghai Urban Culture. In summary, by learning about Shikumen housing, we can also experience the way that Chinese and Western influence combine and complement each other in Shanghai urban culture. From simply looking at the floor plans, we can see how Shikumen houses combine the layouts of traditional Jiangnan courtyard houses and Western row houses. Upon examining the architecture in great detail, we find that the door head, gables, doors, windows, fixtures also reveal the interaction of different cultures. In this way, this style of architecture, which possesses elements of both European and Chinese aesthetics, is a particularly representative example of Shanghai's unique urban culture. Besides Shikumen architecture, the Shanghai-style qipao, also known as a changsan, that was in vogue in the 1930s, also embodies the spirit of Shanghai's culture. Beginning in the 1920s, like many Shanghai-based trends, the qipao was originally a traditional dress worn by Manchu women that was later adapted according to Western style and tastes. The tighter, curve-hugging design of the Shanghai qipao was a break from traditional Chinese clothing styles that de-emphasized the shape of the body. The Shanghai-style qipao made striking changes to the collar, shoulders, sleeves, and the side slits of the original dress design. Shanghai of that era became the origin of this new style of qipao, and the dress yet another expression of the city's melding of Eastern and Western culture. Many of you may have also heard of Beijing Opera. When Beijing Opera came to Shanghai, it also acquired characteristics uniquely reflective of the city's culture. When talking about opera performance in Beijing, we use the term 听戏 or listen to the opera. In Shanghai, we instead say 看戏 or watch the opera. When people in Beijing go to the opera, they focus primarily on the seeing. When people in Shanghai go to the opera, we instead pay attention to the performance as a whole, appreciating the movements and the facial expressions of the actors, as well as the dancing, lighting, narrative, special effects. This approach to experiencing the opera reflects the profound influence of Western theater. There's not enough time to explore all of the many different examples of Chinese as Western culture mixing in Shanghai. But by studying the connection between Shikumen architecture and Shanghai's urban culture, we can more deeply understand the way both cultures have shaped life in this city. Part 5. Historical preservation of Shikumen architecture, 新天地 as a case study. In the 1930s, Shanghai had over 200,000 Shikumen-style buildings. At the peak of the style's popularity, over 70% of Shanghai's residents lived in a Shikumen house. But as the city developed, the vast majority of Shikumen houses were eventually demolished, in a way destroying memories of the city's former way of life. And so, the conservation and the revival of Shikumen architecture is an issue that we must address today in order to be able to pass on our cultural heritage to future generations. 新天地, the district that we looked at in the beginning of the lesson, is in fact an excellent example of one way we can address cultural preservation today. Before 新天地 was established, no one would have ever guessed that an unassuming block of old buildings, previously scheduled to be torn down, would someday become a world-class tourist destination. In 1996, the Taiping Bridge project was scheduled to begin. The Taiping Bridge neighborhood was filled with crumbling old Shikumen houses as far as the eye could see, all originally destined to join the other Shikumen buildings in being raised to make way for new developments. But a Hong Kong real estate firm instead put forth a new proposal. They would combine historical preservation of the neighborhood with new business development.
的旧城改造，石库门建筑正逐年减少，而取而代之的是一幢幢高耸的现代居民住宅楼。上海在变得越来越国际化的同时，怎样保存石库门这个文化地标，成了一个备受关注的话题。
石库门是上海独特的这个建筑物，那我们应该想办法去保留。但是石库门的设计呢，是配合不了现在我们要住的要求。那时候我就在想，是不是应该可以将这个餐饮一些特色的零售这些带进来。很多人也不理解我到底设计的是怎么样。
新天地我们是从97年开始的，他们刚刚也就到上海，已经开始准备想做这个项目，他们就 我就开始全线就开始帮他们记录一些东西。这一章实际上已经开始，新天地已经全面的开始改造。有些这个石库门其实它一种墙，由于这么多年来，其实风雨雨里有些都损坏了，有些他们大量的花了很多的时间，请了一些老师傅来把它恢复到原来的这种美感，这种图案。这是门口的这一块，但石库门里面的整个一个心脏这一块全部改造，然后他们怎么把这个整个的石库门打造了一个现代的这种居住的这个空间。
本着拯救如旧的改造原则，新天地依旧是1个世纪以来黑瓦铺顶、青砖围墙。然而，一步跨进石库门里面，却又是另一番天地。在这里，老年人觉得很怀旧，年轻人觉得很时尚，外国人觉得很中国，中国人觉得很洋气。2012年，新天地毫无意外地成为首批上海市国际文化交流基地之一。
98年我下这个决定去做的时候呢，我脑海中的想法就是让全世界都可以看到上海，我们中国可以发展到这个地步。
整个新天地项目以中共1大会址所在的兴业路为界，划分为北里和南里。北里保留了绝大部分结构稳固、石材完好的石库门建筑，把它们改建成商业用房，同时拆除了一些危房简屋，把空间留给公共广场和步行街。而南里则呈现出石库门建筑与现代建筑融合共生的画面。新建筑大量运用了玻璃幕墙和现代石材，减少了空间的突兀感，新老建筑在此交汇。新天地所在地区的石库门建筑原成型于上世纪30年代，外立面大量使用青砖红瓦，有着厚重的乌漆大门和雕着巴洛克风格卷窝状山花的门楣。新天地不仅在规划上充分体现了新旧结合，而且在对早期石库门建筑的修缮上也动用了当时最先进的技术。
大家知道这些石库门它用的砖，你看到我们其实都是老的砖，这个都已经颜色都已经褪掉了。应该是30年代到现在已经有70多年，大家知道砖的寿命就是50年。所以我们是从国外德国那边进口了一种药水，是用那个针把这个药水打入每一块砖，然后去加固它，使它可以获得这个新的生命力。那另外呢，因为是老房子，所以的话呢，它其实水电煤啊那些现代化的管道它都不具备的。所以说我们当时是掘地，不仅是3尺了，最深的地方到9米。等于把这些管道全部都排下去，甚至在原来的老房子里面，我们可以去做那个电梯。
Their plan proved to be a resounding success. After the first stage of the renovation project was completed, Xintiandi immediately became a new Shanghai cultural landmark. Xintiandi is now yet another shining example of Shanghai's signature fusion of Chinese and Western culture.And the way the traditional and the modern perfectly combine and complement each other in this city.
Traditional houses are important to understanding history. They reflect the culture and the spirit of the city at those times when they were built. What Shikumen represents is not only a style of architecture, but the spirit and the features of Shanghai urban culture.